In this week's episode, I have a story to share with you that's going to serve you on so many levels. Whether you already have a business and you're at a point where you want to create more freedom, not just time and financial freedom, freedom in yourself, in your nervous system, releasing stress and anxiety and overwhelm. But it's also going to really serve you if you're just at the beginning, whether you're considering setting up a passion project to make profit or you're at the beginning stages of a business. This story is really going to serve you on so many levels. Now, before we get into this week's episode, I'm really curious. I would love to hear from you. Where are you in your business journey? What is it that caused you to listen to these episodes? I'd love to hear from you in the comments. I'd love to hear what serves you the most listening to these episodes, or what you would like to hear more of, because your input has a massive impact on what is shared during these episodes. So I'd love to hear from you. So welcome to this week's episode of your Power Packed Podlets. My name is Rachel and I'm your host for these mini magical journeys together. And the intention with sharing this story, and in fact every single episode, is the type of things I would have loved to have heard when I was just at the beginning of my journey with my first, second, even third business. My intention with these is it creates powerful insights. It gives you information that's really going to serve you, but it's also going to accompany you in your journey. Because let's be real, building a business can be really stressful. And purely by shifting how you're feeling in real time, releasing that stress, relaxing your nervous system, and shifting from fight or flight into rest and digest, it's interesting how everything can look different. Everything can feel different, and you can actually make your choices and decisions in your business from a much more relaxed and trusting place. So let's dive into the story. This is something I can only now understand in retrospect, having approached my third business, the one that I'm running now, from a very different place from my first and second businesses. So I was so innocent and naive when I first started out in business. I'd asked myself this question along my career path. I'd asked, when is it I'm the happiest? What is it I'm doing in those moments, and how can I turn this into an income so I'm doing something with my life that I really enjoy? And so I began to set out, like, looking at the things in my life, like, when are the moments I'm happy? And I realized that it was when I was focusing on nutrition, on fitness, on well-being, on spirituality, on yoga, all of those things. And so I decided to embark on a journey of becoming a wellness coach, a wellness expert. But there were other questions that I did not think to ask. Other questions that at that moment in my life, maybe they weren't predominant in my mind because I wasn't really thinking that far ahead. But here is a question I invite you to ask yourself, and to actually give this question screen time and begin to look for evidence and answers to this question in other people's business projects. And it's the following. What does it look like to combine both passion and profitability whilst having time freedom? I'm going to repeat that question again. What does it look like to turn your passion into profitability whilst also having time freedom? Let's add a little bit extra onto that, having time freedom without there being a glass ceiling on your income. Because when I first started out, I saw other people who had wellness businesses who seemed to be thriving. They'd have lots of clients and they'd be charging them 30, 40, 50, even £100 an hour. I was in the UK at this time. And so I just assumed that, if I can charge people up to 100 quid an hour, of course I'm going to have enough money coming in. Of course I'm going to be having a great time doing what I love all of the time. But I didn't actually sit down and explore what that business model looked like and what a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month reality is for a person who runs a business like that. And so off I went, seeing all of the business models of the other wellness experts out there, and I just started following the same formula. I built a reputation, I built a brand, I put myself out there until my classes started to get more and more and more people. Until at one point, and this I find really funny, on the door of my yoga class, it felt like a club because I had somebody standing out with a names list and you had to have your name checked off because if you weren't on the list, you couldn't come in because there wasn't room. And so there would be people waiting to see if others hadn't shown up, if they could fill a slot that was available. So there was a point in my career that was my reality, where a client would cancel and I'd fill that session in. But here's the thing. I was working really, really, really long hours. I remember at some point deciding with my partner to just take a whole year out, a full 10 months of not using a phone, of not serving people because I was so exhausted. I ditched my phone because I'd been glued to it. If I wasn't serving a client and doing a session, I was glued to my phone doing the admin around those sessions. And now I look back and I realize, even though I was earning well for my age at that time, and I was earning pretty well for somebody in that industry, it wasn't that great. My income was capped at about 35 to 40,000 per year, and to reach 40k, we're talking in pounds and euros, I had to work insanely hard. And the moment I took time off, if I had a cold, if I had to have an operation, if I went on holiday, no money was coming in. I hadn't thought beforehand to actually ask, what is that reality? Once my business is set up and I've got a waiting list of clients, what is the reality of working in that line of working in that arena? And it wasn't until I had that level of success in my businesses, I realized the cage I was living in. Now, it didn't bother me at first because I was in my 20s and early 30s. It wasn't until my mid to late 30s that I started to realize how unsustainable working in that way was. And I started to envision, I must have been maybe 36 or 37, I started to realize how tired I was, how exhausted I was, how depleted I was, and how I was on the road to burnout. Not only this, I had this growing hunger in me to serve people at greater levels and to learn and study more, but there just wasn't room for it. There wasn't room to be able to do more with more people because I was just plodding along, making the money the way I'd always known. So there's a second part to this story, because for some of you this is going to resonate. For some of you, if you're going from a salary job into building your own business, you've probably already contemplated this. You've seen that to make the wages you're accustomed to in a line of work that you really enjoy, whether it's something artistic, creative, service-based, you've got to work really hard just to get by. And so that's potentially something that's causing you to pause. It's causing you to put off actually building that sort of business. What if I told you that there's another way? What if I told you that the business model that you see that most people have is not the ideal business model, and it's not the only one? In fact, it took me reaching burnout and quarantine and realizing not only was it not sustainable what I was doing, but I actually had to start from scratch because my whole business structure, like a house of cards, collapsed underneath me in quarantine. It made me realize it was time to actually think differently and ask different questions. Because it's one thing to be an expert at what you do. It's one thing to be able to fill your classes, build a reputation, and become known for something. It's a whole other thing to build a company, not just a small business, a company that can grow exponentially, where you can serve more people at greater levels without exhausting yourself. And so this was a real shift in perception. It was a whole shift in identity and thinking and understanding the structures of business. And so quarantine forced me to go back and study. And I got back to the drawing board and started to learn new skills started to study different business models, started to learn what it is to run a company versus being only a small business owner and service provider. So the business that I run today has actually been built on asking different questions. The question I posed you at the beginning, and I invite you to go away and consider yourself. What is the business model? What's the business structure that allows you to serve more people at greater levels, to have more impact, whilst also creating greater levels of profitability and having time freedom? Because yes, you can have it all. And my recommendation is, if you want to be serving people with, I don't know, yoga, dance therapy, massage, retreats, fantastic. Be mindful of building a business that requires so much of you. There's a point where you just can't go on anymore because you're so depleted. What does it look like to explore not just the business model, it's the identity, it's the leadership, it's the nervous system regulation of being the owner of a company, and then employing yourself as a service provider within that company. So you get to hold both roles, you get to hold both identities. And this has been a massive shift for me, being able to really make a difference in people's lives, whilst also being well myself, being the model of what I wish to impart to others, which is well-being, trust in self, space in the body, in the mind, in life and time. Being able to travel, adventure, learn, all of those things that for me are priorities that I did not have time for, that I now do. So what are you going to do? What are the places, the environments you're going to get into that not only allow you to find the answers to that question, they're spaces in which the breadcrumbs of success can be found. Because success does leave clues. So the environments that you are in, the people you have conversations with are vitally important. So where are those places going to be for you? And who are the people who are the embodiment of not just the success you desire, but also the grounded, embodied self-leadership, or whatever adjectives work for you? On that note, you will have already heard we have an event coming up. When we talk about environments, when we consider the importance of the level of conversations we're getting ourselves into, that is when you realize that events like the one we have coming up at the end of May are really important to prioritize. And I'm making it so easy for you because it's free. It's free, you've got 4 live sessions, you get the replays, you've got a period of time to watch those replays. You're going to want to watch them again and again. You're going to get a lot of value from these sessions. It has never been easier to find those breadcrumbs of success. And as somebody who's gone from running successful businesses, but being burnt out, to running a much more profitable 6-figure business that gives me a lot more space and freedom, what I'm doing with this event is I'm teaching you the blueprint, the holistic approach, all of the levels, not just strategy. It's like, what does it mean in mind to be successful, in body, in identity, in belief in yourself? What does it mean to release anxiety, overwhelm, frustration, sadness, all of those things? What does that actually mean scientifically? What is that? So these are going to be profound conversations that will change your life. So if you haven't signed up yet, make sure that you do. I'm going to leave the link in the description to this event. Now, for those of you, you don't just want the free event, you actually want to work intimately with me, in group and potentially one-on-one. I founded an online school for wellness, holistic, personal development and spiritual women in business. So this is for those of you who are service-based. You're interested in helping others, you want to make a difference in the world, but you are also fascinated by the human experience, and you have a strong desire to know yourself and build a relationship with you. You know that from this place of trust in you and a continual expansive relationship with yourself, you are able to serve others at greater and greater levels. So you're not just interested in strategy and the how, you also want to work on yourself and be in a space where all of the women around you have the same mindset and have the same level of commitment and integrity with self. If that sounds like it's for you, then we do offer a 30-day trial in the school. So you can come in, it's not free, it is paid, but it's low ticket, so it's an easy price point for you to come in and trial out the school space and see it for yourself. If you'd like more details on that, then reach out to me, send me a DM. You can find me on Instagram or whatever other channel that you're connecting with in this podlet. I will share my details in the description so it's easy for you to find me. So I look forward to seeing you next week. I look forward to chatting with you in my DMs. And I look forward to seeing your greater and greater levels of success, freedom, and the impact that you bring to the world. I will see you next week in another episode of your Power Packed Podlets.